Do you feel seen or heard when you watch the news?
You mean like the news wasn't really for me?
Exactly.
Imagine that.
The news is made for the comfort of white people. That is the audience they want to curate.
The Native Land Pod, we talking about the real things that really matter with real folk.
All day.
Welcome home, y'all.
Welcome home.
Listen to Native Land Pod dropping every Thursday on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
It's Kate
and Oliver
Hudson,
host of the new podcast, Sibling Revelry. That's right.
We started this show because, you know what? No one talks about siblings and that dynamic.
The siblings, they know each other better than anybody.
Yes.
You know.
Listen to Sibling Revelry on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
In the new Amy and TJ podcast, news anchors Amy Robach and TJ Holmes explore everything from current events to pop culture in a way that's informative, entertaining, and authentically groundbreaking. Join them as they share their voices for the first time since making their own headlines.
This is the first time that we actually get to say what happened and where we are today.
Listen to the Amy and TJ podcast on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, everyone. It's Amanda Rieger Green. Welcome to Soul Sessions. I am super excited today because I have one of our listeners, Elizabeth from New York. She is here for a reading. She wrote in and asked for some guidance, especially on the next chapter of her life. So we're going to dive into some career, relationship, family, and see what comes through. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here.
I am thrilled you're here. It's a great way to start out the new year with a session. Thank you for being open and inquisitive. Without further ado, are you ready to dive in?
I'm so ready.
Okay, me too. Let me see what is coming through. One of the first things that they are showing me is that you are so good under pressure. You have always been this way. Since you were a little girl, it's like, when things are out of control or there's like chaos or lots of stuff going on, you're the person that jumps in, you take charge, you know how to delegate, you know how to figure things out. So you've lived a tremendous amount of your life and your experience with this sense of pressure that you put on yourself. It's almost like if it's not challenging, if there aren't 25,000 moving parts, then I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing it fast enough. But you have a real shift going on in your energy field of, oh my gosh, I don't want there to be 25 moving parts. I'm really good at organizing and orchestrating and giving instructions and calling the shots, but oh my gosh, who calls the shots for me? Why do I have to be responsible? And you are extremely responsible. And yes, you're detail oriented, but it's almost like that feels overwhelming these days. And it's not that you're not accountable and not going to suit up and show up, but there's something shifting in you where it's like, I'm tired. Yes, these skill sets are really a huge part of who I am, but is this really who I am? Is this making sense?
Oh my God, yes.
I'm like, I couldn't stop talking because they were like just showing me you are exceptional. And I know you're not an ER nurse, but you could easily work in an ICU, be an ER nurse, be a dispatcher, because you're really good when things are intense and executing and doing it under pressure. And you've always been that way. You've been a self-starter, you figured things out yourself, and you had super loving and nurturing parents, but it was like, I've got this. I mean, you were always the kid that's like, no, I don't need it. I got it. I'm going to do it on my own. I mean, like to the point where it was like, okay, we're just going to let her do it. It's her world and we're living in it.
Oh my God, it's so spot on. And even the thing you said about the ER nurse, my mom is always like, you should have been a doctor. You should have been a doctor.
And if you would have been a doctor, you would have totally been working like 48-hour shifts, not sleeping, working 48 hours, performing surgery, and doing 10 other things at once. But what's so funny is you are in this massive personal phase of growth and change. And a lot of it is you stepping back and saying, what do I like? What don't I like? What do I love? What don't I love? And really listening. And you are extremely inquisitive. You love learning. You love to expand your horizons. You love to be thrown into foreign situations and navigate it. I do really well, like when I'm traveling by myself and in the airport and wherever I'm going. And I like that independence. I like not feeling like I'm looking at a map on my phone, like using my intuition and figuring out what to do and also using my street smarts. You're very much like that.
Oh, yes.
It's kind of funny because they're also laughing because, like, when I'm in the airport with my husband, sometimes I feel like I'm kind of rude. Meaning, when I've got somebody with me and they're tagging along, and even though it's somebody I love, it's kind of like, come on, keep up. Don't you get this? Keep pace with me. And you're kind of blunt like that and impatient. Yet at the same time, you are really loving. And, like, you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but it's like, you don't waste time. You're very efficient. But what is shift? Is this making you're laughing?
Like, it's so spot on. It's crazy.
And I mean, you're so smart. You really are. You're very intelligent. You're very smart. And one of the things that they're showing me, especially as far as your life path and your meaning, is really trusting your voice. And it's not that you don't trust your voice, but all those insecurities of like quirky outside of the box ideas that you have that very much define you. You are in a phase of wanting to create something that is your own. You've always worked at managing, leading, orchestrating, organizing for another cause, for someone else. I mean, were you on the student council? Like, I can see you in school, like organizing and like leadership roles and like, I'll take it, I'll do it, I'll be the organizer, I'm the secretary, I've got it. Did you have roles like that in school?
Not so much in school. I think it came on like later.
Yeah.
I was a little more creative back then. And then I just my logistical brain.
Okay. Well, you just said something that made sense why they took me back there. Why I was like, were you like on the student council in school? You just said I was a little more creative back then. So you just spoke with your wisdom and from your soul of what's being reflected to me is that's what feels like it's depleted right now. While you are wonderful at pragmatic, organizational well-being and well-being of others, right now you're like, my creativity feels like it's at an all-time low. What am I doing for me? And you're wanting to create something that is yours, and yes, it's personal, but it's business-wise. And you're like, I don't know what it is, but I want my own business, my own company. I want to be in charge of something that is mine and not, the top of the heap of managing everybody else. Does that make sense?
It's like I have chills. Last night I was sitting with my coworkers and I was like, I think I've done what I have done the last few years and worked so hard and I want control of everything. I want to know I'm capable.
We know you're a control freak. And I say that as a term of endearment with love, but you're so tired of being a control freak. Okay, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just had to say.
No, I fully am. It gives me satisfaction, fulfillment to be like, I own this. I got it done. Last night I was talking about how I want to make like these little movie shorts and I want to like just kind of decompress and do these little creative projects.
So I want something that's my own and I want to be creative doing it and feel creative. And here's the underlying subconscious, unconscious message that's coming from your soul. I want to use my unique voice. I don't want to feel like I am leading and managing and orchestrating, running a production. I want to be using my creativity to impact people. Like there's this element of I want to make a difference. I want to impact people, but I want to share my unique voice and my creativity. And also, you're very intelligent. And your soul is saying, hey, you know that you're smart, but you second guess how intelligent and articulate and creative you are, but nobody would know that about you. And you get social anxiety and nobody else knows that about you. Like there's social anxiety in you sometimes where it's like you know how to meld and fit in and jump in, but usually it's when you take charge. But sometimes you're just kind of like, oh my gosh, it's people-y out there, and so there's this energy of sometimes your insecurities and your self-doubt that comes through. But it's like this is a time of saying, no, I am right-sized. I'm comfortable in my own skin and my creative self-expression, I'm unleashing that for greater freedom. You're a freedom seeker. And for as much as organized as you are, freedom is a big thing for you.
I have like this warm overwhelming feeling of like warmness. Everything you're saying is landing. Yeah. It just feels like I needed to hear this.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and this is a big year for you. So as far as, and I want to just talk about work for a minute, and then we're going to talk about relationships. And who is John? Do you know somebody named John?
Yeah.
Is John a friend, or like, who is John?
Somebody I was involved with years ago.
Okay. Do you still keep in touch with him?
No.
Okay, for some reason, they keep talking about him, and I don't know what this is about, and you'll have to follow up with me, and you don't have to, like, force anything or do anything weird, but there's either something to reconcile with that, or there's some sort of reconnection there. How old were you? Like, how old were you when you were in a relationship with him?
30.
30. Okay. Well, they're bringing him back up for some reason. So there's either unfinished business in your heart or your head, or something that either needs clearing or reconciling. Does
that make sense?
Okay. So they're like, they wouldn't just bring it up out of the blue, and they don't usually give me names very clearly, but they keep saying John. So I was like, okay, who is John? But they're saying some of just old things in that relationship have to do with relationships going forward and what you're available for. So even though I wanted to talk about career, they wanted to talk about relationships.
That is so interesting, because it's not necessarily that person, John.
Yes.
But there is a lot of like factors surrounding that time that impacted me.
Okay. And thank you for clarifying that, because it's like, sometimes it's like people and places, mark significant chapters in our lives, phases of growth where we fall short, or where we're learning lessons that are repeating today, patterns that we're breaking. And they're saying some patterns of behavior at that stage in your life are limiting you from finding like your happiness and your love and your partnership and your person now. And you're not doing anything wrong. You're just growing, you're evolving, and you're opening yourself up. And you're a mover and a shaker. So finding your person, you need someone who gives you your autonomy to be able to do what you're going to do, and then someone safe you have to come home to. You want safety above all.
I said this verbatim last night.
That's what they just told me. But wait, we have to go back to this, because this is kind of amazing the way it came through. So does this make sense with old stuff that you're letting go of with John, that we don't need to broadcast to everyone else? But as far as like in that time, not so much him, but like you said, there are certain behaviors and traits that are keeping you from finding this person that creates stability, security, consistency, and safety, yet gives you your free, beautiful, wild, autonomous self, and is your landing pad, your safe space.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, then you can work on that, right? Because I know you're going to do your homework. You're a homework doer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Like you're a homework doer. Okay, good. All right. So that being said, I will tell you this year, and don't be upset with me when I say this is not your year you find your person. Okay, this is not your year that your person appears. It's not time yet, because you are, I'm not going to be schmaltzy, but I'm going to be schmaltzy. You're falling in love with yourself. That's kind of, I know you know that. Okay,
and
commit to it.
I don't want that to end. I want to be so present in it.
Okay, because they were like, she's not going to find love this year, and like she's falling in love with herself. The fact that you just said, I'm really happy finding me, falling in love with me, you are right on track. That is where you're supposed to be. And I hope people out there take Elizabeth as an example of when it's a season of falling in love with you, saying, I don't want it to end. Because when you truly commit to yourself, magic happens. Because it's right place, right time energy. It's your deepest seat of empowerment. And you came in this lifetime to, using your voice, experience empowerment. So the fact that you articulated, I don't want this to end. I want to fall in love with myself. That's what this year is about. And it's really you finding and digging deeper spiritually, opening up, expanding your consciousness, and enjoying your surroundings, but starting to put yourself out there. Let's talk about these film shorts that you want to do.
What is up with this cable news echo chamber, Tiff?
Hello? Yo.
I'm Andrew Gillum, former mayor in Florida and former Democratic nominee for governor of Florida.
What's up, everybody? I'm Tiffany Cross. I am a journalist, television host.
I am Angela Rye, politics and culture commentator. This is a place where we can welcome you home, because at Native Land Pod, We talking about the real things that really matter with real folks.
If I were to say to y'all right now, God is good, you would say
all the time.
If I said all the time, you would say
God is good.
Absolutely. We speak a language that you can't even learn through osmosis. All day.
Welcome home, y'all.
Welcome home.
Listen to Native Land Pod dropping every Thursday on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Fear of the unknown is the greatest fear of all, and for millions of Americans, there is no greater unknown than what to do when faced with an Alzheimer's diagnosis. My name is Dana Torito, and my podcast, The Memory Whisperer, takes a closer look at Alzheimer's disease and those affected by it. Like many of you, I've experienced the disease firsthand. I've been an advocate and care partner for decades and have written extensively about the subject. Each week, I'll talk to people who've been personally affected by the disease and learn how they coped with it. Folks like TV personality Lisa Gibbons.
Action is the antidote for fear.
And nurse and dementia researcher Dr. Fayron Epps.
We no longer can be silent. We have to speak up. We have to share our experiences so we can help each other and learn from each other.
Listen to The Memory Whisperer on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcast.
My name is Theo Henderson, host and creator of the podcast called Weedy and House. My lived experience in houselessness is extensive. I was one of over 75,000 experiencing houselessness on a given night in Los Angeles. Here's the simple truth. Houselessness is everywhere. It affects over 500 million people in the United States alone. Weedy and House will explore the senseless tragedy of displacement from the perspective of the unhoused. On my podcast, we're going to cover far more than my story. We're going to debunk the myths around houselessness. We're going to remember and humanize the community who have passed by spotlighting Houselessness Remembrance Day. More importantly, we're going to look at ways we criminalize the unhoused. Because if you can demonize them, you can criminalize them. Unlike the mainstream media's way of speaking over the unhoused, my podcast centers their voices in the conversation. Houselessness is not a monolith. Listen to Weedy and House on iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Let's talk about these film shorts that you want to do. They keep saying, just start doing it on the side for fun with no pressure, because you like to apply pressure to yourself. So you are working, you have a job, you're extremely busy. You know, these are things that are very clear. But when you have a little bit of downtime, play with some things, see what you like, and then share it with the people you care about, your circle, your friendships. You have a lot of stuff around your heart, and usually that's grief and pain and loss. And so there's a lot of sadness around your heart that this year, and you falling in love with yourself and digging deeper, and your healing journey has to do with grieving. And it's literal grief, and it's grieving old aspects of yourself. So it's two things. Your father is deceased, correct?
Yes.
What is his name?
Kenneth.
Okay, hold on. He said, "Isn't she wonderful?" He said, "Isn't she wonderful?" And I said, "She is." And I said, "She's really wise." And he said, "She was born that way." He's like, "She was born kind of giving everybody instructions and like telling everybody what to do." He said it was really hard to discipline her because she was kind of the one already taking, you didn't need disciplining because you were going to be 2 steps ahead, and you would have disciplined yourself if you made a mistake. Does that make sense?
They call me bossy baby.
Yes, that's what he's saying. He's like, yeah. And it's like he's shaking his finger, like showing you, like telling people what to do, and like and shaking your finger. And he's like, she's so good at that. But he's laughing because and he's talking about love and love for you and you falling in love with yourself. He's like, she needs to meet her match, somebody who kind of bosses her around a little bit in a way that she can receive it. And he said, it's going to take a lot for that. It's going to take a lot. But he said, I'm working behind the scenes on that. I've got some pain in my upper abdomen and my stomach. How did he pass away?
Oh, wow.
I mean, it's like really like it's all stomach and abdomen pain, and it's like burning. It hurts.
He had a 20-year struggle with Parkinson's disease and then got Lewy body dementia, which took his life eventually. But at the very end, he stopped talking. It was stomach pain, stomach
yes.
pain.
I mean, and that's what he's showing me. He's like his stomach. And, you know, wow, your dad had Parkinson's for 20 years?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I mean, and he's like, well, you can tell how strong she is. You know how strong I am. He's saying she's so strong. And he says, you please tell her if I could have hung on, if I could have beaten that disease, I would have been there for her. He says, I'm sorry, I'm gone. And he says, you need to get angry. He says, you've had a hard time being angry that I'm gone because you love me so much and you miss me. And you're also so freaking practical. Like, this is life. This stuff happens. I hate this. But he says, you are not honoring your anger. And he says, you get to be angry that I am gone, that this does not feel fair.
I mean, you're so spot on. The other day, I have always felt since he passed, like he's very, very much with me.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I didn't lose him. I have a new relationship with him in the spiritual sense. But a few nights ago, we were all at dinner and everybody's talking about their dad. And for the first time, I got like this pit in my stomach, like, wow, they've really had a lifetime with a dad. And my dad got sick when I was 9. So I only knew him sick. And so like, I feel like it's for the first time that I really missed out on an experience with him.
And he says he is giving you carte blanche. And your dad was really smart. What did your dad do? He's so smart. And Parkinson's is not okay. You know, it is a gnarly disease. I've seen it in family members and other people, and it's a slow burn sometimes. And you had to watch that slow burn from 9 years old, which is a very formative time. So it's almost like it stunted your growth, even though you're extremely mature and all those things. There's a spiritual part of you that feels like your growth was stunted because you were already responsible and you had to become more responsible, more in charge, more in control of things. And that snapped you into being more of an adult, responsible human rather than a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old. And he says it's okay for you to be mad about that, to just be kind of waking up to, oh my gosh, I loved my dad, but man, this stunted some of my childhood and my childhood wonder. And not that you have a wonderful mother, and it was exhausting on your mom and hard on her emotionally. And you knew that empathically because you are very empathic and energetically sensitive. So you were like, I'm just going to do better. I'm going to button up. I'm not going to tell her when I'm hurting. So you shut down a lot of your emotional intelligence out of this. I'm mature. I've got this all pulled together. I don't want to be a burden on anybody. We've already got this going on. And your dad is saying you are just realizing all of this, and it's not about being mad at him or your mom, but he says you need to get mad. You got to get this anger out. So it's almost like you falling in love with yourself and saying, I'm ready for it. I don't want it to end. It's like going back to 9 years old and starting to be creative and funny and, embracing your childlike wonder, being a little rambunctious and rebellious. Is this making sense? Your dad is so direct on you unleashing the beast. Like, he's like, unleash the beast. Like, okay, he's funny.
You are like reciting my inner monologue. It's absolutely insane.
He loves you so much. And he says, I'm sorry I'm not there. And he says, I know it was hard. And he said, it was hard on me and my body. And he said, and I was angry and I did my best to not show it, because he said it was just hard. But he says, first of all, I'm okay. I know you have that connection with me spiritually, and you talk to me all the time. And he's talking about butterflies. And he's saying, like, does he show up in butterflies sometimes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see it everywhere.
Yeah. He's like, that's what he said. He says, tell her it's me. It's the butterflies. She knows exactly what I'm talking about. I show up in the butterflies. And he says, it's me. And he says, I love that we have this spiritual connection. He says, I'm over here to give you this opportunity right now to go back from, 8 or 9 years old on and start, kind of reclaiming, redefining that time. And let me tell you something I know about time travel. That's what I'm going to call it, is we can travel back to certain points in time and our memory. And sometimes they're painful, traumatic times. And sometimes they're beautiful, nostalgic memories, but we can go back and talk to ourselves and say, hey, you, guess what's going on with you right now? You're, going back to when you're like 12 years old, and they keep taking me back to about when you're 12, because you're just extremely independent and figuring things out on your own. Hey, yes, you're so strong, but you can ask for help. You can break down today. You don't have to work so hard. You don't have to conceal this from your mom. You can be loved and nurtured, and like telling that version, that younger version of you, those things, and like loving on her and saying, hey, girl, I got you. Come on, I need you to jump in with me today so we are fun and we're more playful. Does that resonate the way they're having me communicate that to you?
So much so. When I found out my dad was sick, like I wasn't familiar with Parkinson's, but
of course not. You're 9 years old.
Yeah, Michael J. Fox had just come out at the time publicly that he had it. So I used to go to this little like current events club where I'd go to school early and we'd read the newspaper and discuss different topics.
Of course you did.
You want to know the funny part? My best friend and I only signed up for it so we could get a bagel before school.
So your ingenuity, which, like ingenuity, but also you love to learn. Like that we already said, you're a life learner and a seeker. So if you're learning and assimilating knowledge, that's kind of fun for you. That's your creativity and joy. Okay, go ahead.
So basically, the Parkinson's, I recognized it. And I remember asking that teacher, I said, do you die from Parkinson's disease? And she said, absolutely, like almost right away. And I'll never forget, I went to
And you were 9?
No, I was probably 12.
All right, that's why they're saying it's very fundamental.
Yeah, and I went into the stall and I sat there, and I think that was my first shutdown ever. And from that point on, I kind of pushed my dad away. I was like, my parents are hiding this from me, but I'm going to lose him. So like, I'm going to distance him so I don't have to deal with the pain. And I think from that point on, I stopped being a child and feeling free.
Thank you for sharing that. And I knew that 12 years old around that time was poignant and was like a drastic shift in shutting down your freedom and your creativity and your self-expression, because it was like, time is money. And that's one thing you're unbreaking. Your dad is laughing so hard right now because he says that's one of your soul's points of evolution is, yes, time is money. You're not a time waster. You're effective, but also knowing that you have an abundance of time. Time is expansive. Money and resources will come. So it's moving out of financial fear, taking financial risk, putting money in a creative endeavor, like these shorts and things, and knowing it's going to pan out or somebody's going to support you in it. Those kinds of things, he says, but go back to 12 and what we just talked about and that conversation. And, that teacher didn't even have her filter, but it was such a divine setup. And then it shut off some of your energy field. And I want you to think about this, and this will be really helpful in your journey this year and your healing. So in the chakras, the energy systems in the body, they develop at about kind of 7 years at a time-ish. So the root chakra from 0 to age 7, the sacral chakra from 7 to about 14. And the sacral chakra is your creative self-expression, your passion, your desire, your sensuality, your intimacy and sexuality. And all of that stuff was thwarted, halted. It's almost like it went from learning to go in this swirling clockwise position to being halted, and then it's turned counterclockwise. So it's almost like you're turning around this ship, because this is going to help you in intimacy and love and allowing someone to love on you and trusting someone enough to hold space for you personally and intimately. This is about so many things. So time travel back there, love on that girl, and also talk to that teacher. Say, hey, I know you didn't mean to say something, but you changed the course of my life.
That's where the anger comes in.
Yes. And that's why that your dad is like, tell her how to time travel. Because I've had to my dad died when I was 18 and I watched him die, and I have time traveled to that point and all the things. So we're in the club of, losing a dad at a young age, but my dad, I had him for 18 years and he wasn't sick, but I've time traveled back to that space. But talk to that teacher, go back, and say what you need to say all of your frustrating stuff. And then at some point you're going to get to go back and say, thank you, your honor what she gave you and the divine setup. And that's what this year is about, following those breadcrumbs.
That's beautiful. And it resonates like more than you know.
He says, I love you so much. And he says he remembers you just holding his hand, sitting next to him and holding his hand, steadying his hand most likely because of the Parkinson's, but holding his hand. And he's like, he says, you are a stabilizer, and you know that about you. You make other people feel comfortable. And by the way, let me just share something with you. Before we got on this call, I was like, oh, I should tell Elizabeth this. I should tell Elizabeth this, like personal things about myself. And I was laughing. I was like, why do I want to talk to her about myself? You have the gift of putting people at ease. People just share stuff with you without you asking. I was like, oh, yeah, I just want to sit down and like talk to Elizabeth about my struggles. I mean, I really thought that about you before we got on the call. And your dad is smiling because you are very wise and you hold space for people. But this is a year of you holding space for yourself, allowing other people to hold space for you. But does that make sense about you holding his hand and steadying his hand?
Yes. And my dad and I used to do this thing, like my mom and I, we would always laugh because my dad and I had the same thumb. It looks exactly alike. So in church, we'd be holding hands and then like we would put our thumbs next to each other and like laugh. But also the thing about putting people at ease, everything you're saying, I had this conversation last night and I told someone the motto that like how I lead my life and every day is be so much yourself that others feel comfortable to be themselves too.
What an amazing motto. I mean, that no wonder I was like, gosh, I kind of want to like hang out with Elizabeth because I feel like she's going to give me some good wisdom and advice. It's funny. We have an Elizabeth who connected us. So the name Elizabeth and my sister's name is Elizabeth, you know, and names are very powerful. I want you to search the origin and the meaning of your name.
That is so crazy. I was on the phone with my mom yesterday and she's like, do you know, I love your name so much. And she's like, and I have two sisters that are older than me. And she's like, I wanted to name Jill Elizabeth, but Papa, my dad.
Your dad wanted you to be named Elizabeth.
And she was like, I think that it was predestined and that in 87, you were coming and you are meant to be Elizabeth. And I said, what if I was Elizabeth in all my lifetimes?
I think you were, because and what's funny is Elizabeth connected us. Your name is Elizabeth. And yesterday I was on the phone with my sister and her name is Elizabeth. She goes by Mimi, but her name is Elizabeth. But I was like, gosh, Elizabeth, you know, I was like, Elizabeth is coming up, Elizabeth. And I was thinking about your name, but I want you to Google the origin of your name because our names have meaning. And of course it does, you know, Elizabethan times and all those things. There's a lot of connection in that area with your name and the origins of your name. It's like Anglo-Saxon, your name is, but look it up because it has a meaning and I don't remember it, but it's part of your story, your destiny. And funny thing that you and I have in common is my dad named me, and they were going to name me Leslie with a Z.
Yeah.
And with this raspy voice, maybe Leslie with a Z. They were going to name me Leslie. And when I was born, my dad said, can we name her Amanda? And then the first thing my mom said was, well, who did you date that was named Amanda?
Oh, my God.
And he was like, no, I just love that song Mandy by Barry Manilow. And anyway, he's like, well, you know, they named me Amanda. But he named me and was insistent on it just like your dad. And I think that's pretty amazing.
Do you go by Mandy?
No, very much like you and very bossy, which you'll get a kick out of this. When I was 6 years old, we moved around a lot. And so I was in first grade. And I came back for my first day of school and I announced they had called me Mandy up until then, Mandy with an I. So Leslie with a Z, Mandy with an I, go figure. But anyway, I came back from first grade and I said, by the way, I introduced myself as Amanda today in school. I'm going by Amanda now. And that was the end of that. So family, close family, a few people in my family call me Mandy, but Amanda.
What is up with this cable news echo chamber, Tiff?
Hello?
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 Yo.
I'm Andrew Gillum, former mayor in Florida and former Democratic nominee for governor of Florida.
What's up, everybody? I'm Tiffany Cross. I am a journalist, television host.
I am Angela Rye, politics and culture commentator. This is a place where we can welcome you home because at Native Land Pod, we talking about the real things that really matter with real folks.
If I were to say to y'all right now, God is good, you would say
all the time.
If I said all the time, you would say
God is good.
Absolutely. We speak a language that you can't even learn through osmosis all day.
Welcome home, y'all.
Welcome home.
Listen to Native Land Pod dropping every Thursday on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Fear of the unknown is the greatest fear of all, and for millions of Americans, there is no greater unknown than what to do when faced with an Alzheimer's diagnosis. My name is Dana Torito, and my podcast, The Memory Whisperer, takes a closer look at Alzheimer's disease and those affected by it. Like many of you, I've experienced the disease firsthand. I've been an advocate and care partner for decades and have written extensively about the subject. Each week, I'll talk to people who've been personally affected by the disease and learn how they coped with it. Folks like TV personality Lisa Gibbons.
Action is the antidote for fear.
And nurse and dementia researcher Dr. Fayron Epps.
We no longer can be silent. We have to speak up. We have to share our experiences so we can help each other and learn from each other.
Listen to The Memory Whisperer on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcast.
My name is Theo Henderson, host and creator of the podcast called Weedian House. My lived experience in houselessness is extensive. I was one of over 75,000 experiencing houselessness on a given night in Los Angeles. Here's the simple truth. Houselessness is everywhere. It affects over 500 million people in the United States alone. Weedian House will explore the senseless tragedy of displacement from the perspective of the unhoused. On my podcast, we're going to cover far more than my story. We're going to debunk the myths around houselessness. We're going to remember and humanize the community who have passed by spotlighting Houselessness Remembrance Day. More importantly, we're going to look at ways we criminalize the unhoused. Because if you can demonize them, you can criminalize them. Unlike the mainstream media's way of speaking over the unhoused, my podcast centers their voices in the conversation. Houselessness is not a monolith. Listen to Weedian House on iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Is there anything else you want to know about? I mean, as far as career goes, start working on these shorts, play with it, do it without pressure, utilize your creativity because doors will open and you have wonderful networks and connections that this is going to unfold into something. It's almost like you own a production company or like something with these creative shorts. Like you want a production company. Does that resonate? I mean, like that's what you want. And they're saying it's coming. I mean, it's not just going to boom blossom this year, but this year and next year are empowered money-making, very individualistic. So career changes are coming. But right now, this is about you being creative and having fun and doing it as just a fun side thing because it will be fine-tuned and get clearer and clearer as the year goes on.
Love it.
Okay.
It resonates so much. I have a very quirky sense of humor and personality, and like it's very unusual. And I'm just like, I have to hone in on that because it's a whole character in itself. And so my friends and I were playing with like who this person is, and do we keep it exactly to who you are, or do we change it?
Okay, I tell you this, what you just said, again, back to your wisdom, you have a quirky, different, unique point of view. And the fear of being criticized, you're talking to a Libra over here. I know you're a Virgo. You know, I got a lot of Virgo in me. We don't want to be criticized, and we got that perfectionist mentality, but also you have a lot of compassion. So that's that sensitivity of, you know, I don't want to make anybody upset, or I don't want to, you know, it's like, no, I've already worked so hard on this. So it's really about, hey, am I enjoying this? Am I expressing myself wholly and wholeheartedly and having fun? And does it mean something to me? Then I'm going to put it out there. And if somebody doesn't like it, they're not in my tribe. And that's okay, because it takes different folks, you know, different strokes, different folks. So not caring about what other people think about you as much is one of the things that you know you're learning. And this is an opportunity to kind of develop a different kind of resiliency through that and have fun.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. And as far as relationships go, like, it's not time yet because you are falling in love with you. So keep on that path. I mean, I think you're going to meet someone next year, but you're going to be ready to. And there's going to be something where it's like you wake up one day, you know, and it may be around the holidays next year. And you're like, gosh, I'm in a good place. Like, I want somebody to do this with. And like, when you know, you'll know, and then it's like, it will be time. So just trust that magic, the magic of that timing. What were you going to ask me?
It's interesting because so many of my friends are married and have kids, and all I have ever wanted is to have a family and children. And I never imagined this time for myself, but I'm in this period where anything is still possible.
Yeah.
And the idea of like, this last 2/3 of our lives are dealing with kids, spouses, aging parents, all your responsibilities. Yes. This time is so for me, and it's like that window is closing, and I just want it to be everything it can be.
Yeah.
So
and
I'm really
you're embracing it. You just said, I'm embracing it. You're embracing it in a beautiful way. And I think it's an exceptional example to a lot of other people out there, and especially in this year that it is a year of finding our personal power, reclaiming it. So much of it is in relationship with ourselves. So what you're doing is an example to other people, and I think a real testament to you trusting your intuition. Oh gosh, this time is about me, even though on a linear or in all practical terms, I'm running out of time and my age and my biological clock, all the things, the urgency that we create. You're like, no, this is about me right now. And those things will come. I don't need to be in that fear. I need to be present. I think that's very wise.
This investment in myself is only going to allow me a deeper relationship when the time does come.
Absolutely, because you're going to trust better, deeper, know yourself better. All of that is true. And part of my experience too. It's like when I chose to like myself again and then start to fall in love with myself, that's when I started being the expression of love. And my partner, my husband, showed up in my life as if by magic. I wasn't looking. It's all divinely synchronized. Is there anything else you want to know that we didn't talk about? Or
I don't know if you can see this, but speaking of children, not that the time is now, is that in my...
There's two of them. There's two of them. I'm like putting up two fingers. There's two of them. It's funny, when you meet your person, it's not a long dating courtship situation. It's pretty much like a couple of months in, you already are like, oh my gosh, I love you. Oh my gosh, I love you. It's one of those things that when you meet your person, both of you know, and you're both mature enough, because you're in that point of attraction where you've both done the work, you're both pretty mature, you both know what you want, and it's not about playing games, it's no nonsense and straightforward, which you appreciate that anyway. But that's who shows up. And it's like, okay, and then we're going to figure out wedding and marriage plans, and we're going to get all this orchestrated. I mean, it's like you meet and almost get married within a year. You meet, date, get engaged, get married, and then family starts. It's very sequential, not just long drawn out and back and forth. You're just going to know. And that person will know too. It's just going to make sense. So all of that is coming. But right now it's about you. So, yeah, two children. They're two spirits.
I love that. I love that.
Your dad loves you. He just said, I love you. He said, please tell her. He said, I know she knows I love her. And he says, I know how much she misses me and figuring out life without me, and especially without the element of caregiving for me and that dynamic with your mother and your sisters and him. It's been a journey and a process, so you're re-individuating yourself, reclaiming yourself, hence you going back to 12 years old. He's like, that's where you go back, so you start rebuilding, redefining, forging this new path forward so you feel whole again today. And that, if anything, out of this whole call is what you've been looking for these past, since your dad died, is this sense of wholeness, feeling one again versus all of these kind of personalities or compartmentalized roles of yourself, feeling like, who am I in my own skin today? And he says, you're right on track.
I love that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What a gift.
Yeah,
This
he's
is
really sweet.
incredible.
It was lovely to connect with you. And I I said, we'll have to connect and talk, because for some reason I was like,
we need to be friends.
I think we do. I mean, I literally was putting my makeup on this morning and I was like, gosh, I should tell Elizabeth about this. And I'm like, where's my, I wasn't even thinking about us hopping on the call, but I was thinking about you, and I was like, oh yeah, I should just tell her that. I mean, this was like personal stuff. I was like, wow, because I was tapping me into your energy field of this comfort level. So yeah, we'll have to stay connected. I love this.
This has been truly, thank you. This is such a gift. I am very cautious of like opening my energy in these ways because I know that it can be draining, and it is such a match, I feel. And it's just like you validating my inner monologue. And
I love that.
The things I deeply know, but I can't verbalize or grasp for myself.
Well, thank you for that. And usually, and this is to everyone, the thing I know about my gift and the development of it is, and this is kind of my tagline, is astounding people with their innate abilities. But so much of what I'm able to do is to communicate all the inner stuff from the inside of you that you know deep down in a way that resonates with and articulates exactly the essence of who you are. And it's like we wear a mask in the world. We wear a mask, in our intimate and family relationships. And then there's a whole other personality inside us. And it's like kind of marrying all of those versions. So the true essence of you is revealed in the healthiest, most dynamic and individual way. Thank you all for joining us today and spending your time. I encourage you all, if you haven't listened to the earlier podcast in January, to go back and have a listen, because January is such an imperative month for building a solid foundation and clearing away anything that is limiting you from following your dreams, designing your path forward, because February is a month where it's going to feel revitalized and fresh, and you want to be able to use that from a place of your truth. Take care. Be well.
Why don't more infant formula companies use organic, grass-fed whole milk instead of skim? Why don't more infant formula companies use the latest breast milk science? Why don't more infant formula companies run their own clinical trials? Why don't more infant formula companies use more of the proteins found in breast milk? Why don't more infant formula companies have their own factories instead of outsourcing their manufacturing? We wondered the same thing. So we made ByHeart, a better formula for formula. Learn more at byheart.com.
Do you feel seen or heard when you watch the news?
You mean like the news wasn't really for me?
Exactly. Imagine that. The news is made for the comfort of white people. That is the audience they want to curate.
The Native Land Pod, we talking about the real things that really matter with real folk.
All day.
Welcome home, y'all.
Welcome home.
Listen to Native Land Pod dropping every Thursday on the iHeart Radio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
It's Kate.
And Oliver Hudson. Host of the new podcast, Sibling
Revelry.
That's right.
We started this show because, you know what? No one talks about siblings and that dynamic.
The siblings, they know each other better than anybody.
Yes.
Listen
to Sibling Revelry on the iHeart Radio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts.